conduct a certain way. But with Maya, she never wanted cookie cutter students. So she never wanted us to look like her. She wanted Jonathan to conduct like Jonathan. And then part of what she was doing was helping refine my conducting to make sure that what I was doing was also clear to the musicians.
You also was a conductor at the Ebenezer Temple Church near where you grew up. And so there's some gospel on your song. And record label based in Atlanta, Georgia. As we talked to Jonathan Rush, assistant conductor for the Baltimore Orchestra, that's one of his picks for this summer. This reminds me of an interview we got.
It is not easy to pull out here.
There will be no American conductors in major American orchestras. And so I'm thinking, presumably, more conductors who grew up in the church who grew up in gospel. What do you think you bring to the orchestra?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think one of the biggest things that I'm able to bring is, yes, I do have my musical foundation was gospel. That's why I'm here. God is to be able to, not just bring in classical, but get conducting, we're going to get the soul that I have, directing my gospel choir, the soul that I have singing gospel on top of all of the, joy that comes from the gospel. So you're going to get the whole joy that makes up the they're bringing new insight, they're bringing new ideas and new experiences. The way we were brought up musically is completely different than the way our teachers and their teachers were brought up. And so that's what, I would like other orchestras and other people to acknowledge and to see, when it is our time to actually, step up on the stage. I want them to see that. And we have something wrong.
Welcome back to your playlist for the summer. Here's a Teach concert by sure by Samuel Conductor. We've been hearing a lot more of Samuel Coleridge Taylor's music on classical radio just this past year.
Number one, I just think it's an absolutely beautiful piece. But with Coleridge Taylor, he's trying to combine the Afro style with Western classical music style. Kind of similar to how Brahms did, Hungarian music to classical music. That's kind of what Coleridge Taylor was doing for Afro-Cuban music. I'm appalled at the fact that, Coleridge Taylor didn't get as much attention because it's genius stuff.
Jonathan Rush, the New York Times recently had a headline that read something like, orchestras looking for conductors, look no further than your assistant conductors. Where do you think you are? How would you describe Jonathan Rush in this moment?
Honestly, I think that I do have something to offer, but then I still have things to learn. But that's just having some fun, listening to all my music and just making sure, when people do see me, that they're getting all of me. They're getting, they're getting authentic Jonathan.
Well, Jonathan Rush, assistant conductor of the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be here.
And you're listening to Here and Now.
The summer tradition of live music in Vermont is returning to our region. Celebrate by taking part in the summer festivals happening all around you. VPR's Summer Music Festivals Guide has the dates and places where you can enjoy area festivals and links to their details on how to stay safe. It's all available at vpr.org when you search for summer festivals.
Sponsored by the Vermont Arts Council and Daedalus Wine.
Good afternoon. Thanks for listening. This is Here and Now on Vermont Public Radio. Coming up in today's second hour of Here and Now, many Americans are quitting their jobs as companies call workers back to the office. What to consider before you quit? That story, along with the latest from the search operations at the collapsed building in Florida. Stay with us. We've got lots more Here and Now coming up next. VPR has support from our sustaining members and Golden Valley, offering summer lift service beginning July 1st with mountain biking, hiking, live music, and freebies all summer long. And Good News Garage, a Vermont nonprofit providing transportation to local families in need through tax-deductible car donations. goodnewsgarage.org.
Funding for Here and Now comes from the listeners of WBUR Boston and from BetterHelp, connecting people with a therapist in a private online environment for issues like depression and relationships. 17,000 therapists are available through BetterHelp using a computer or smartphone. BetterHelp.com/public. And Hint, maker of fruit-infused water with no calories or sweeteners, available in more than 25 flavors, including watermelon and pineapple, in stores or delivered from drinkhint.com.
This is Here and Now. Starting July 15th, millions of American families will get an injection of cash into their bank accounts. It is the new enhanced child tax credit, part of the American Rescue Plan, which President Biden signed in March to help with pandemic relief. Let's bring in Jill Schlesinger with CBS News and host of Jill on Money. Hi, Jill.
Hello.
So how much is that new credit and who qualifies?
Well, the government increased the amount from $2,000, which is where it was. Make below certain threshold amounts. $75,000 or less if you're single, $150,000 or less if you're married filing jointly, $112,500 or less if you're filing as head of household, and there's a little squish room. Another $20,000 of income will allow you to get some part of the credit, not the whole thing.
All right, well, clearly lawmakers, when they passed this months ago, they were trying to give American families an injection of cash in this precarious time, but the economy is now revving back up again. Do you think that the need is still there, especially for some of those higher income families?
Well, I guess for the higher income families, maybe not. But remember that this tax credit is going to lift millions of Americans. I've seen a lot of different numbers, but it's just an enormous number, tens of millions of people up out of this precarious situation, many of whom would be on poverty levels. So I think that this was the best that they could do, knowing what they knew back in March, right? They were trying to pass a law in anticipation of what would happen. So, indeed, some of the wealthier folks who might be able to claim parts of the credit, they may not need it. But I think for most of the vast majority of people who are getting it, they certainly can use a tax credit for their kids.
And just briefly, to be clear, you don't have to do much of anything to get this credit, right? It just shows up in your account if you file taxes last year.
Yes, exactly. The IRS has a bunch of information based on 2019 or 2020 federal income tax returns. So about, I think, 36, 39 million households got letters saying, hey, we think from the IRS that Uncle Sam says, hey, we think you're due for this. I will say that if your income is different, your address is different, your bank account is different, your number of kids has changed since then, there is a really neat tool on the IRS website, irs.gov. It's called the Child Tax Credit Update Portal. So you'd want to update information there.
And just before I let you go, the reason we're talking about this now is that today is the last day to opt out of the credit. Just opt out. But why would anyone want to do that?
Well, I mean, first of all, there's a lot of people who are making more money this year than they did last year. And so while the IRS might think you're entitled to it, you may not, you may know already I'm making more money. I won't be entitled to this. The IRS has an unenrolled tool. So if you don't want to owe the money back to Uncle Sam when you file next spring, you may want to unenroll. If you're not sure, just unenroll, because if you do actually qualify, you can get it when you file next spring.
I see. That is Jill Schlesinger, CBS News business analyst and host of Jill Online. Thank you very much.
Take care.
And you're listening to Here and Now.
On Wall Street have been empty for more than a year, but after restrictions were lifted in New York, bankers are planning to go back.
Labor Day, I'll be very disappointed if people haven't found their way into the office, and then we'll have a different kind of conversation.
Restaurant owners in that neighborhood can't wait for them to come back. How eateries stay alive after losing business from their primary customers. On the next morning edition from NPR News.
I'm Jack Lepiarz. Authorities in Surfside, Florida have upped the death toll from last week's partial building collapse to 10. 151 people remain unaccounted for. The rescue workers say they remain hopeful they will find more survivors. Coronavirus cases are rising again in Tokyo less than a month before the start of the Olympics. Cases in Tokyo Prefecture have gone up for 8 straight days after Japan eased a state of emergency there last week. The games are due to start on July 23rd. After a one-year postponement. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is not saying whether he and Pope Francis discussed a push by some U.S. bishops to deny communion to Catholic politicians who support abortion. Blinken, after the meeting today, says he doesn't do domestic politics. Pope has not commented on the campaign by some bishops, which would apply to President Biden. You're listening to Here and Now.
VPR is thankful for our sustaining members. They provide us with recurring financial support every month. Some of these generous donors include Wendy and Tom from South Burlington, Joan of Troy, New Hampshire, Matthew from Brattleboro, Karen in Williston, Robert from Northampton, Massachusetts, and Brian, who says that VPR's news and music are more important than ever. If you're able, please become a sustaining member too at vpr.org. Thanks.
Good afternoon. Thanks for listening. This is Here and Now on Vermont Public Radio. We have support from our sustaining members and Lawson's Finest Liquids, Waitsfield, whose tap room and beer garden with mountain views, fresh brews, and food are open. Lawson'sFinest.com. And the Green Mountain Chamber Music Festival, Age of Romanticism, with violinist Chad Hoops, Wednesday, June 30th at Ellie Long. GMCMF.org.
Funding for Here and Now comes from the listeners of WBUR Boston and your NPR station, and from ABFX, Boston-based and offering event services coast to coast, in person, online, or some combination of the two, to bring them to life at abfx.com/events. And MapWorks, creators of MATLAB and Simulink software for technical computing and model-based design. MapWorks, accelerating the pace of discovery in engineering and science. Learn more at mapworks.com.
From NPR, WBUR.
I'm Robin Young. It's Here and Now. Over the last year, beginning with COVID survivor Diana White, who founded the group survivors for, we've reported on COVID long haulers, people whose symptoms from brain fog to devastating illness linger or get worse after they're cleared of the infection. But researchers are only beginning to study one of its most devastating outcomes, suicide. In a recent op-ed in the online journal MedPage, the director of epidemiology for the St. Louis Veterans Affairs healthcare system writes that long haulers are prone to depression, anxiety, and neurological disorders. We must deal with this now to prevent it from ballooning into a suicide crisis. Now we're going to start and end this next conversation with an offering. This is Hitting Home. The number to the National Suicide Hotline is 800-273-8255. And right now we want to bring in Nick Ruta, whose wife Heidi Ferrer had unbearable symptoms for over a year and took her own life in May. At just 50 years old, she was a screenwriter for the TV show Dawson's Creek, the mother of a 13-year-old. Nick, gut-wrenching. We're so sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, and Diana of the Survivors called us last week and said this man wants to tell his family story. What were her symptoms? What was her condition?
Well, pain in her feet and the sort of classic COVID toes, which a lot of people had back then. We thought was just plantar fasciitis, so we went to a podiatrist, and he said, "I treat this all the time. I don't think this is plantar fasciitis." And he sent her to a neurologist. Her foot got so bad she could barely walk more than just downstairs in our house.
Had she already had and recovered from COVID-19? I mean, did you already know that she'd had that, or was that still undiagnosed?
So we went to get the original cheek swab tests at the drive-thru, and those tests were extremely inaccurate back then. We both tested negative, and later on she ended up getting a more specific test developed by a Stanford researcher, Dr. Bruce Patterson, who has developed some more specific tests for long haulers who didn't get a positive test early on, and her tests there were clearly definitive enough that her general practitioner was willing to refer her to the long.
You're breaking my heart. You're shaking my confidence.
Oh.